Hello everyone and welcome to Art Salon. I'm Ellie Shore. There are a lot of new faces here today, welcome, and a lot of good friends and people who've been coming to this for a long time, welcome to you also. We have now completed 3 full years of doing these and wow. It's been an amazing experience. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce Miroslav Antic tonight. He is so well known as a teacher and as a painter, and so many people are just thrilled that they have the opportunity to study with him, and his paintings are fascinating. And this is an opportunity, as it has been with many other artists who come, to get that background, to put those pieces together, to understand where someone's influences came from as the art world has developed. And Miroslav is certainly someone who has been very keenly aware of contemporary art and of art history and has pulled so many pieces together in his career. So I will now introduce Miroslav Antic, and he will tell you.
Well, thank you all for coming. I was just thinking how I've been getting lately, as all of you have been, from Ellie, those announcements for this talk, and it says almost half a century of work. Is that what it said? Or something? or 45 years of, and you feel like, how'd that happen? And all of a sudden, it seems. Because it used to be that a quarter of a century was a long time, so now it's half a century. So actually the work that I'm going to show you starts around maybe 70, 71. I was a student at the Academy of Fine Arts in Belgrade, former Yugoslavia, and I was at that time, I think in my 3rd year. It was a 5-year college, and in my first 2 years, I did drawings and paintings, pretty much what everybody else was doing, faculty as well as students. So there was what I later learned, kind of a situation when art was overripe, and when something's fruit's overripe, it's kind of sick. And I think I was feeling that somehow because I could not be happy with anything I did that looked like somebody always. Between 2nd and 3rd year, during that summer, I almost felt like a psychological, emotional crisis, really kind of almost a nervous breakdown because I couldn't be happy with anything I was doing. At that time, if all you remember, we were all interested in lots of Eastern philosophy. That helped me a lot, I think, and kind of formed my thinking, Zen Buddhism in particular. And I all of a sudden thought how opposite from art that's very artsy and very dripping with style and personal touch. And there is Zen master's answer to what is Zen. Zen is your everyday thought. And there's no mystification or anything. At the same time, John Cage came to my hometown, who was a very famous American avant-garde musician. And again, as it happened, very close follower of both Duchamp and Zen Buddhist philosophy, Zen Buddhist himself. And because we had a famous modern music festival in the summer, but I didn't see him. I only read his interview in the magazine, and he described his silence piece. And it said that that's what it is. It's basically 3 minutes and 11 seconds of silence. And when it's performed, the pianist comes, opens up the piano, sits there for that time, and then leaves. And that's the piece. So, it kind of, blew my mind. So I said, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to draw and paint something that I choose in front, and I'm not going to choose anything pretty or anything colorful or anything beautiful. I just whatever, very, very simple. And I'm going to sit there and paint it until it's done. And that's it. I'm not going to make art out of it. It's going to be, if anything, non-art. So ideally, if I was painting a person, which I did too, the person, when I finished the painting, would get up off the painting and go. So I did stuff like this. This was a small painting like this, basically an old tea kettle. In the middle, actually, you can see me and my easel, but that's not really. So then that would be one. Another one was this, and this is stuff that was lying around. And what was happening is a great release I was feeling when I was doing this, because instead of frantically searching for something, I was really just concentrating now, this, that, very simple thing. And I really felt, healing, sort of. And always had the idea that if you're really frantically searching for something, it's always behind you, whatever you look, up and down. If you stop that, it kind of comes here, and like a Disney movie. And, by the way, this doesn't look anything revolutionary in any shape or form, but in the school, everybody was thinking, this guy's, something wrong here. And, luckily my professor, who was a very, well-respected abstract painter, wise, never say many things, he kind of said, and all he said was he would come in twice a week and sit down there with every one of us and say, good, yeah, that's interesting, like that. And then when they leave, you feel like, wow, that's really cool. So then, this was a friend of mine who was a very smart guy, but a druggie, taking big-time drugs, ended up dying from that only a few years after that. I remember he was able to, probably because of the drugs, he would really sit like that and be, not move at all, so that I could. This was my shirt, I remember. That was the so-called kurtas, if you remember. Came from India. Beautiful fashion, by the way. And, he had that Jesus face. And, I put him straight on. This was a motorcycle cut. And it really looked like, and pretty much everybody who saw the painting was saying, Miro, you really got him. So this was a professional model who was one of those guys that's very severely retarded. So for those reasons, he again would sit like that, and I had a luxury to have one model for myself for a whole month. He would just come and sit for me, and we were sitting down, and he's like that the whole time. Doesn't blink or anything. And I remember the background, everything I try to make as spare as possible. But in any case, this kind of process had a very deep, meditative, and releasing effect on me. So that soon after, I really started to have ideas that are, a little bit more, again, this black coat on white. So this was all between 70, 71. This work is maybe 77 or 6. I came here in 73. And by that time, I was heavy into Duchamp for a few years, but really heavy. However, it passed, so that I never tried to make a career, and thank God for that, because I've seen people who have done that at that time, who were either, if you all know Mel Bachner, this is an artist in his late 60s, 70s. He's the guy who, when you go to Miami Basel, he's got those big paintings. They say blah, 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 one word in many different colors. Or he would take one word like velocity, speed, and he would then come up with, but basically it's beautiful paintings he makes now, and he sells them for $1 million a piece. So he came, even though he made his fame showing in New York galleries like Leo Castelli, putting pebbles on the floor and charcoal drawings of arrows, and it was all celebrated for being not having any object. That fashion lasted for about 10 years, and then it was gone. Julian Schnabel came in and kefir, with all the drips again. And then what happens if you are a conceptual artist? You play chess the rest of your life, like Duchamp himself. That would be, for somebody who loves to paint, like, worse than being put in prison. So I decided I'm not going to give up painting, although I really, and I also remember one of the first art forums I saw on the front page, it was a blank page with words, "Is painting dead?" Okay? And then inside you had all these artists, Doug Hubler, Joseph Kossuth, who say, "Oh yeah, paintings, that's it, finished." And then Jim Dine and they all sounded pathetic, the painters. No, we're not dead, painting is, this kind of thing. And I was really agreeing with the guys who were saying that it's dead. But again, past, as far as I'm concerned, because imagine if that's really the truth, how ridiculous that is to say painting's dead. It's like saying music's dead, just because one person and one group of people have reached some kind of what do we do? Nobody paints? What about those kids who are born every day who just can't stop? Every classroom has a few of those, at least one. And incidentally, they proclaimed in the mid-20th century the death of the novel in music. John Cage himself didn't say, "Okay, I'm not going to perform anything. I told you with this piece what it's all about. Be aware," which is a Buddhist thing. Enjoy every moment, if you can do that, you're an artist yourself. No, he started to go back and make music in every different way. So I decided I'm going to paint because I love the process. I love the time spent in it. So I did conceptual pieces still. I did a series of 22 by 30 Arches paper watercolors of these things. And I made letters that I embossed in there so that you cannot see it right away. But it said here, 2 views of this. And this is a famous painting by Raphael, one of the cardinals from Renaissance. And, I projected that in both instances. Turn the slide this way. And when I did the bottom one, I had to have a mirror here and put the painting there so that I could see it. Okay, so this one, see, says 2nd and 4th. And this one is reproduction ripped off from the book. You can see it. And then I did in watercolor a copy of that and had it photographed. So then I put these together. So the first one is Vermeer's original. This is presumably 2nd. 3rd one would be my watercolor. This is the 4th. So it's basically kind of artwork without artwork, because these are both mechanical. This is the same idea. It has endless painting, which again, this is reproduction from the book. This is my copy in watercolor. And in person, you can see all of this because it's clear much more than from a photograph. This is a photo of that. And then this is another watercolor done from this. And certain things appeared in process. So the implication is if you continue doing that forever, that painting would be in 10 years probably start to change quite a bit because of all the printing imperfections of my hand and all of this. So yes, this is a copy of, here it said mirror image, because it's actually a mirror image of a famous painting by Edouard Manet. This says something about the artless piece, something like that. These are all reproductions. There's nothing that I did there except put it together. So one day I was having with my first wife a lunch, and I was, at that time devouring, and I really congratulate myself on that I always had an interest in other artists and learning about what they do and understanding what they do. So I always recommend that to everybody I teach. And I started having journals in 1971. I have them to this day, books like that I write about, journals just about my work and ideas they may have, or, at that time I was very impressed by Frank Stella, who again said, coming right after abstract expressionism, if you know those stripe paintings that he had, mostly black and white, they have a certain size, 2.25 inch size of stripes. All that is basically he took the thickness of the stretchers in the back and then repeated that, okay? And he famously said in an interview, there's no mystery here. What you see is what you get. And that famous, what you see is what you get. Abstract expressionists were talking about angst, about human, all that romantic stuff. And this young kid comes in who's like 24 years old and starts painting like this and says, no, that's all a bunch of crap, So I feel that it's a similar impulse that I had with those stupid still lifes. Maybe if I lived in this country, I would be more informed. By the way, until I came here, I hardly knew any American artists, and I think that was pretty much the case even in Western Europe. Anyway, I started to think of the flatness of the surface of the painting and how painting was always been a lie, basically, because it's a representation of three-dimensional world and two-dimensional space. So originally I wanted to have just these shapes of canvas, like 3 panels, 2 panels here, 4 panels there. And that one time I was having a lunch with and I kept looking at the neon sign in the back, and oh my God, what it for? So that was kind of a lucky, so I did that, and I painted these things from all masters deliberately because I was trying to make a point that this is about the painting, but it's not my painting. I'm not painting that. What's represented is used. My piece is the whole thing with the neon and the cut and all of this. So, interesting thing, when this happened, this was actually when we installed the show, and I had a couple of friends there. It was not open yet. And we connected everything, and I went someplace over here and went down and I plugged it in, and everybody was standing, because I never saw the paintings for a year and a half with neon. And all of a sudden I could see in the back of my eye, the floor just lit up when this happened. And whoever was, we all said, oh my God, this was, because visually it was a stunning thing, and it cannot be really photographed well. So at that time I wasn't believing in visual, so it kind of bothered me that the visual became so important. I was like, what? That I don't want that. But it was the first moment where I started to actually turn in my thinking. Soon after, I was at the MoMA and Sunday, and around the corner, I remember I at that time admired Jasper Johns as well, because again, he was a conceptual artist, idea artist, and also a painter. So, he was a hero as well. But I came around the corner at one of the paintings, and momentarily I felt in my chest like that feeling when you see a great Titian or something, Rembrandt or whatever. Ooh, you cannot explain what it is. You just feel this thing. And then I realized it was actually one of his flags, a white flag, what he calls. So for a moment you couldn't recognize the image, but just the surface, how it's painted. And then I'm driving back to Boston for 3 hours, and I'm thinking about that. I'm not supposed to, Johns, I didn't even know he had that stuff in his work. It was basically what he was painting, the alphabets, that stuff, as he called, that I already knows. Then I went back and I said, wait a minute, he's got all the mark making that everybody from cave paintings to, and this is important to think about, okay? That stuff never dies, even with the computers. There was a woman who was interviewing me about this, and I was going on and on about the conceptual side of it. And she said with a smile, well, it's almost too bad you have all these, because they can stand on their visual, and I felt like, well, she's full of shit. She doesn't get what I'm telling her, But I actually started to believe that that's exactly what, and to this day I believe that, what's important. You can have all the ideas that if you don't have the visual thing, that thing that whatever, even if it was acknowledged for 10 years and bought and celebrated, it will not, because look at it, when you study art history, everything that has survived because of the visual, okay? Because in Raphael, we don't care about what's painted there, or nowadays it's not a, or in Caravaggio, that stuff is all about God and biblical happenings and all that, but it's not that. That's because there are everybody painted that. Only there one Caravaggio, so it's how you interpret, that's what matters, and that's what flies out there and survives, Okay, this is a close-up of, this piece is, they were all 6 by 6 feet. So basically, just to clarify, a lot of people think when they see them like this, that this was on top of the canvas. These are 2 canvases. And I would put the neon in between. And some of them are quite elaborate, like this. This actually had 5 different pieces. Interestingly, a few years before in Fort Lauderdale, I worked for the billboard company, Donnelly, at that time, when I learned to actually project and paint these big faces, except it was a, black velvet lady and that kind of stuff. That had, I think, something to do with this. And this is a friend of mine with those 2 paintings. This is without neon. I had oh no, there is a neon, yeah, you can't see it. So I had a show in Boston here. It really kind of made my career. When this happened, a year later I got a job at the museum school, which was kind of almost unbelievable, but had a show in New York, so all of that. At least in Boston I became, and I got to paint all my favorite artworks, and to, like this I think is the loveliest portrait in history. And this is in the studio without, you can see the seams here. So these are 3 panels. And so, we are also seeing here that something that later on I learned, it's very symptomatic about the whole attitude of the whole 20th century that carries now. If you really think about it, any artist that has craft and ability to do something like this is actually, in the last 100 and some years, looked on that either he's retarded or she, or old-fashioned, they're, and instead, we have the so-called primitive art comes in with cubism and or art of the children, art of the, so there's kitsch, anything that's not really skillful is and I think I maybe felt that. That's why I need, like, without neon, I would never paint these things. So, then it would be a copy. But altogether, and it sold very well. Every single one sold, and I don't think anybody knew why they were buying it. They didn't know my reasons. They bought it because it looked good. And it looked good because this is a good image, and I did a pretty good job. And then the neon there, you can't go wrong. So anyway, while I was working in my studio on that, I'd applied for a grant, state grant, which I didn't win. And next year it was a sculpture grant. So I had all this junk around and neon lying around. So I started to every day arrange them and photograph them. And different combinations. So I applied with this, and of course I got the grant. So and I never done sculpture before or since. So I've done some in the classroom in the first year, but I really like these things to this day. It's something that could not really exist other than momentarily. And, you will see, like, this is one version of the same, once you have the door there. So there are my reserve tires. And, I remember thinking of Rothko a lot when I was doing this. Although, I wasn't thinking of, at that time, of abstract expressionists at all. I mean, I knew and I studied them, but it wasn't anything that I wanted to do. But Rothko particularly, because I felt, these things are everyday, but they have some kind of a spiritual thing, going on the way, because of the light, because of, these are different versions. And then after I won that grant, we had an exhibition. I think it was at Boston University, and this is what I did. I asked them, can I take a 1 meter by 1 meter and chisel the wall out? And they said, okay. So I did that and put the piece of neon, which is actually belonged to one of the paintings, and piece of plastic. And, I don't know. To this day, I really think these are good pieces, particularly this one. This was another one. Again, there's a piece of rope here in front. But, using this stuff you use to pack paintings and stuff. Okay, so now we are coming to, I think, 82. I did this series of paintings, 8x7, that had chair as a theme. In the show, this is one of the kind of tragedies of my life, that I had a sculpture like this, that this painting was, I had a piece of metal pool, and there was an old chair like this, blue, and I had a guy fix the water be dripping on the chair the whole time. And, we photographed it, but I don't know. I remember Mark Vasquez was his name, but, he lost that slide of that, so I don't have it. I have another sculpture in there. So it was stuff like this that I just kind of placed on this image of the chair. I think I was beginning to probably, as a influence, Kiefer, Schnabel, people like that, to loosen up even more, because this was great fun to paint that. There's lots of texture, lots of very painterly. I was learning to paint, I think, at that time. In this way, anyway. A student of mine made this sculpture, and I did a bunch of drawings like this. And actually, this was a small painting way before Gerhard Richter was known to me. To me, it was interesting to make it blurry or out of focus, or as if it was moving, because of the enormous weight that these things have, because they're all done from granite, the heaviest. And interestingly enough, this was a small painting about this big. I did this out of the blue, and then years later, maybe 10, 15 years later, this surfaced again. And I think that's something to do with those journals, because if you go through your journals backwards a few times a year, sometimes I either get stuck, I don't know what to do or how to resolve something. I go back and I just read the stuff, a few years, and almost every time I find something that I never used, or I used it once. I just, wrote it down and maybe did some sketches, but it didn't fit in what I was doing at the time, and now it does fit. So that's another reason, if you haven't done that, or do it, because it's a... So again, this is now 80s. Again, this is a big painting, maybe two pieces. I had that done by the same guy who did the Mona Lisa piece, did this thing. I was visiting Yugoslavia. I was on the Adriatic coast, and small town on the sea, and I went to the cemetery and came across this tombstone with these plastic roses, and it hit me somehow how they were faded, and they had great beauty. And plus I said, well, flowers, that would be challenging. Oop, nobody paints flowers these days. And I figured if I painted with enough muscle and messy, something will happen. And then I had, this is basically when I kind of came the closest maybe to abstraction, but not quite, ever. Terry Winters was one of my favorite painters at that time, and I think he influenced me. He influenced a lot of people at that time, but I immediately figured out how you had to avoid his type of imagery. Otherwise, you immediately look like him. Because he was working from these little biological textbooks, these organisms that have a very specific, sometimes they look like berries or, I don't know, like, and as soon as you would do that, you would telegraph to everybody, oh, Terry Winters is your guy you're studying with or copying. And, you know, I started, this was asphalt, tar, you know, that you use on roofs. And I still have that. I'm planning to use it again. There's newspapers there. The yellow thing is shellac. And this is asphalt. This is, you know, the delicacy of this to that. I think it was kind of interesting for me at that time. You know, I remember I called this shared sleep, which I saw in the Milan Kundera, in that famous novel. There was, I think he was describing love and saying that, you know, that's really, you know, you're in love when you share sleep voluntarily, not just sex. But it could refer to death as well. And these decorative patterns were kind of virgin territory for me, flowers. There's lots of Jasper Johns here. You know how he would leave the drips towards the bottom of the... And, you know, I would call these things Levant or Adriatica or, you know, something that, a part of the world that I originated. This was a huge painting. This one's called Adriatic because that figure was discovered in the Adriatic Sea. It's one of the few, two of them like this. There are maybe less than 10 original Greek bronzes ever found, and this is one of them, and they are magnificent things. Anyway, a lot of fun painting this way. There is that little figure that Dennis and I brought from Boston. It's in its director's office. Still, I guess. I haven't been to that office a long time, but it used to be. That's a satyr that was found in the Pompeii. So again, this was all tar around here, which you could see, and then these very romantic roses. Stuff like this interests me and many people, but you know, there was really no way to use it in a serious way. So this was my attempt to. I think you find artists looking for, like pop art. You know, they needed to go to banal, to everyday, in order to revive the. And we feel those tremors still to this day. So in here I was beginning to use trompe-l'oeil because these are pieces of tape that were painted, but you know, pretty convincingly. I remember the guy came to choose the work for, this went to ICA show called Boston in Dialogue Now. And so he said, okay, I'm going to take this one too. You're going to take the tape off, right? And I was like, the guy was there for an hour. He didn't realize there was a... So, but again, I think to me, the stripes and this were talking similar to neon about, you know, this is a perspective space in here. And then there are these things that are, I think I call this painting adornments. So in these things, I had a chance to play with color, like Matisse, you know, which color would go well with what. So I think that your past is basically traces of your learning, you know, how to do things. And then, you know, this thing again appears a few years later. And this also. Trompe-l'oeil, you all know what that means in French, fool the eye. So that's the same image. This kind of goes back to what I'm doing at the moment in a strange way. Anyway, we'll see. This is Versailles. This is actually not a Western picture. It's a French academic painting from 19th century, which I saw in France about this big. And I remember I bought a card of it. And again, it's 8 by 7, I think. At that time in Boston, I did those floating bubbles, or whatever they are, ellipsoid shapes. But I used to swim for exercise about 5 days a week at Tufts University. And one day, in the end, when you shower, I started to focus on the water, and I started to see the individual drops and shapes. Each one had a highlight and the shadow. And that was a moment like, wow, okay, let me try to do that. So this was the first painting I did that with. This is the close-up. And then, this is with the irregular shapes. Again, these paintings are all French academic girl with the tambourine, very kind of silly little paintings, and, kind of maybe Playboy type of for that time. And this was the painting called Mystère. I think that's how you say that in French. And of course, this guy is going into this chapel and is carrying flowers, bouquet of flowers. And this is a priest there, and I painted my face there, who is kind of peeking. He's going to meet a lady in there. In the 19th century, you had lot of cute little, they're all small paintings like this. But you blow it up to 8 feet, and it becomes something else. So, and again, this was another trend that they had just before Impressionism in the academic art was go back to the Roman, Greek, but all very sentimental. And so it almost did not matter what the image was in the back. It was what I did to it. And this kind of a texture that you see before is basically, I discovered this by accident. I had it on the floor because I just glazed this painting, and I went to wash my brushes, and I did like this. And then 5 minutes later, I looked again, and water was reacting with the oil and making all these strange shapes. So then I did that deliberately, see all the stuff there. So it kind of gave it a nice, because to paint that directly was not satisfying somehow. So I needed to put it behind some kind of a veil. Close up. And this is one of my favorite. I don't know why, but I love the image. And somehow the stuff that's on top of it doesn't quite gel. And of course, motherly love can be sweeter than that. Again, this is a huge one. This is in New York. I took the picture of this. You know how they have those period rooms, slides, and I glazed it red. So, and again, I don't have to repeat. These are all painter tape. And this is maybe around 2000, something like that, or 99. This is not a member of my family. My mother came here in 2000, and she brought all these photographs, mostly black and white, this big, of our family. And there were actually not that many. And it gave me an idea, and I started to paint, not yet here. This is a 19th century child labor, and I did a bunch of those. And then I saw a book on these animals that at that time I was thinking of them, wow, how similar this is to bodybuilding. And because, look at that bull. And I didn't really know, but I learned since then that they use the same method. They give animals, like Arnold used to shoot himself with the, how do you call that stuff? Steroids, yes. And they do that with animals. So they, 3,000 pounds animal. Volca Museum has this one. So, oh, look at that. And, by the way, I had this idea of painting these animals for maybe 45 years. And I thought, I'm not going to do that. Nobody's going to buy this. So finally I said, okay, I'm going to do this. I remember my mom saying, why are you painting a pig? Who do you think is going to, buy that thing? And then I had a show, and that was the first painting that was bought by a big-time collector. So, aha! So, and then that brought me to This is one of the two pictures that I have. No, this is the only picture I have of my dad and me from that time. From the mid 80s, I have more, but I was maybe 3.5, 4, something like that. And I think we all have a picture more or less like that, or similar. So I think that people can relate to it. Again, my mom was saying, who's going to buy your family? But, I'll tell you, I was really the most successful in these things in terms of sales. So I did this painting 3 times, and I sold it all 3 times. This was another version. And that's also my dad. He was a special ed teacher. So all these kids are mentally retarded more, some more, some less. Interesting thing about this is that when I was growing up, I used to often look, TV. We didn't get TV until I was, 12, 13, 14, something like that. We had a small radio with 2 stations on it. So you spend a lot of time, I was the only child at home, and you were just reading, or you're drawing something, or you're making things. And I would be looking at these pictures. And I don't know, to this day, I have a special, I don't know if anybody else has that, but if I look long enough, I can kind of hear the silence or hear the sounds. I can really be transported there. I don't know. I never discussed that with anybody. But or maybe you have to be a nostalgic person, which I am. So, after I finished this painting, I realized, look at every single kid is looking straight in the camera. And my dad is looking that way and showing his best side. So it's like no, but look at every single one is going, and the sun is, at that time you had to take pictures in the high sun. Anyway, some Hollywood producer bought this. So I don't know. You ask him why he bought that. This is my mom and I. That one sold, and I did another version of that which didn't sell. And this is, again, I call this the favorite because this was when I was 6, before first grade. We went with the kindergarten on the coast, and I still remember this teacher. She was so pretty and sweet and lovely. We all were kind of in love. We didn't know what love was, but I always cherished that because I remember this kid. I'm the one standing there, and this kid came late, and he had a big tooth swelling, and I had my hands on her shoulders, and he comes in and pushes in, and see how you can't see it in there. So now I only have one hand, and he has the other. So anyway, and the little girl is in her. So that's my mom and her co-workers. Maybe my mom was here 28. She's the last on the right. Somebody in Palm Beach bought this a couple of years ago. This one I still have. And actually, I think this one is better than the other one. So this one is right here in that building. This is myself when I was 14. It was, I think maybe some kind of ID thing. But I took it to the photo store and I said, can you make it out of focus? So they did, because again, I don't know, I couldn't paint it straight. Anyway, this is the current work in my studio. The slides are taken by me. The color is really interesting in this one because it's purple in the background, and then there's this kind of a teal color, I think. So again, I think of, I don't know, black and white TV without sound, with poor picture going behind, and something's there, some story, but who knows what. It's a painting from a photograph, and that's me when I was 6. Oh, that's that same time, and we had a photographer, and every kid took that hat and went on this boat and took a picture like that. So one of my heroes when I was growing up was Roy Rogers, and this is one of the last paintings I did. Again, I had it straight. I had something else in mind. I think for students in my, there are a few here in my advanced painting, I always push them to take risks because, I've learned that through experience. Plus, I've learned that through just reading what other artists over and over and say. The latest one I read was Christopher Wall, who said something, the more chances you take, the rewards are greater. So, sometimes it's easier for me to say that about your work or my students' work than to do it myself because, you do the whole image and, every little stitch is there and then you feel like, ooh, I don't want to mess it up. And then you start messing it up. I take a roller and, paint like this and then I hate it. Then I have to, so you have 3 layers here at least, 1, 2, and then this one. Anyway, this is Kennedy's anniversary of his murder was last year, and I saw a Frontline program. This was a very important moment in my life, I remember. I think I was early teen, 10, 12, 13, and still over there, and when that happened, I grew up in a family that had a strong American, I grew up with my mother's side of the family, with my mom and grandmother. My mom was born in this country, along with a sister and brother, but they were all 3 taken back during the Depression years when they were 3 or 4 years old, and they grew up there. My mother married my father in, I think, 45, 44, when she was 17, 18 years old. So she couldn't go after the war, but my aunt and my uncle came, and they've been here, they're still here. So, of course, we had communism over there, so, to me, America was really kind of a promised land, and I remember getting, did you remember how old the photographs, even in Americans, were all very little? People had better eyes or something at that time, Why is that? I don't really, like that. And then you look at that, like my uncle sends us a picture of, he's shoveling snow in front of his little, it's really a kind of a smallest cape there is, but to me it was like, oh my, and the car in front of it. And so when this thing happened, we had kids on the street whose parents were communists. So we would argue, Russians are better, no, Americans are better. I used to argue with my cousin, whose father was, that America is the biggest country in the world. And he said, no, it's not, it's Russia. And I said, no, and I showed him on the map, North and South America, of course. And he was like, oh shit. So he went to his father, and next day, his father explained to him, no, this is only United States. This is something else. So he tells me, and I was like, oh my God, that's like, so a lot of that stuff going on. So this guy becomes a president, and he's like a movie star. And on the other side, you have Nikita Khrushchev, and his little, Russian wife in the babushka. They're all like balls, and these 2 are like, and then they kill a president. I had never dreamed that they can kill a president, let alone an American president. You never heard of that thing. So it was really an unbelievable. I remember looking at the pictures of Johnson, and Johnson to me looked like a kind of a mean guy, and I remember talking to him. He did it. He wanted to be a president, and he did it. It was like that. And so when I saw that anniversary Frontline program, it's really very moving. So this is the painting I did, and I did one more of which I don't have a slide of, bigger one, of that moment, the famous photograph of the guys jumping on the back. So again, I kind of, this is almost like blood on the. I found pictures on the website. I'm still supposed to do the painting. I keep. First time I ever saw that, you probably never saw it, of him dead, with eyes open, with the head blown off in the hospital. Did you all see that? I never saw that, and you know, it's really horrendous picture. A big hole here. So, you know, you wonder, should I do that kind of painting or so? Anyway, we'll see. But this is actually a small painting, but I'm planning to do a large painting this way. Although I did another image of Roy Rogers, so maybe I got it out of my system. But this thing I came up with, and I like it. I don't ask me why. I haven't figured it out yet. But it's basically serves the same thing as the neon light or the realistically painted drops. And I think so. It's the end. So westerns I love also to this day. So this is from one of the westerns. The last scene, of course, the heroine and the hero riding into whatever. And then when I projected it, I turned it up the other way, and I said, "Oh my God, this is like what you see in the back." So decided to do it. This was in that show, Claws and Paws, by the way. I think that's it. Thank you very much.